All right, so again, we're talking about quadratics. Remember, we said that's a U shape. So here it says a dog trainer is fencing in an enclosure represented by the shaded region. So it will help you if you mark this as enclosure. Hold on, let me turn this off.
Take lessons from that Khan Academy guy. Oh,
Huh?
I said you should take lessons from the Khan Academy guy.
Oh, yeah.
Why?
He's really good at writing.
His writing, he's really good.
So are you telling me my writing's horrible?
No.
Wow, Michael.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it's like super good, so yours could be better. Your computer writing has potential.
It's in his first year. It's in his first year.
I didn't say it.
So if you could please write enclosure. If you can't read it very well, it's ENCLOSURE.
Yeah, Michael.
You could like go back to first grade and make your handwriting a little better. Maybe learn from your first grade teacher. All right. So here we go. So that's an important thing to know is that shaded region is called the enclosure. Anyway, the trainer also has 2 square-shaped storage units on either side of the enclosure, so that's the dotted line, to store equipment. She can make the enclosure and the storage unit as wide as she wants, but the total length has to be 100 feet. So there's a limit up here for 100 feet. This has to be 100. These pieces right here can be as wide as they want, but the length cannot change. Does that make sense? So like think of like a fence. It has to maybe be up against the fence, but it can go as far out to the street or whatever as it needs to go. Do you know what I'm saying? So that's something that's important to understand as well. All right, hold on. Okay. So it says, let S represent a side length in feet in one of the storage units. So this is S right here. Now, he did say it's a square, right? So if that's S, then this also has to be S. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then that's S and that's S. Side length, yep. Does everyone see how I labeled that?
Yeah.
Okay. Label the length and width of the enclosure in terms of S. So this is where things get a little dicey. We'll talk about that in a second. Write the length or write the function L of S to represent the length of the enclosure as a function of the side length. So this entire thing is 100. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Can anybody tell me, because it just wants the length, if you look here, of the enclosure. Can anybody tell me what I could write as this length? Just this green one right here. Eliane is ready to go. Now, okay, so that's a good point. It could be, but I want to label it in terms of S. So do you agree, everybody? Hold on. Do you agree, everybody, that the entire length is 100? How could I just find the length of that enclosure? Because it's obviously not 100. How could I write it? This is super big and huge. And if we figure it out and you don't understand it, say something. Reese.
Is it 100 minus 2S?
Do you guys know how he got that?
Yes.
Okay, if you don't, that's fine. I want you to watch, though. Do you agree? I'm going to say your name, but I know a ton of people don't understand it either. Do you agree this is all 100? Yeah. So in order to find this right here, Would you agree I'd have to take 100 and then subtract these two S's to get that? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yes.
You got to be honest.
Yes.
Okay. So down here, we're going to say the length is 100 minus the two S's. Reese, good job on that. So let me, huh?
LS stands like L is blank, right?
Say what?
L equals that one.
Yes, L does it.
Oh, it's like 25.
Okay, so let's say again, this whole thing is 100, right? This is just, you don't even have to write anything down. This is just me proposing things to you. Let's say this was 25 and this was 25. What would my enclosure length be?
50.
50. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
And that could be different. Now, this could be 30 and 30. What would this length be?
40.
Does that make sense? So that's exactly what you guys did. You guys just came up with that. That was great. Are we good so far?
Yes.
Okay. So we found that, which is nice. And then it says sketch and label the graph of the function on the given coordinates. So it says 100 minus 2s. Now, if I type that in here, hold on. Okay. So if you look, the x, so our line's going to go down, right? Whoops. The x is the side length of the storage, and the y is the length of the enclosure. So if I look here, can anybody tell me what 0, 100 means?
That's where it starts.
Yeah.
That's like where it starts. Like at 0 side length, there's 100 length of an enclosure.
So that's saying if you didn't build any square storage units on each side, you would get 100 length of your enclosure. Does that make sense to everybody? Hello?
Yes.
Okay. What does this point mean? 50, 0.
Where it like
You only have storage boxes.
You only have storage boxes. That means each length of your storage box is 50 and you don't have an enclosure, which makes no sense for your dog training, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What about this point right here? Maybe if I can get it there. 2060. What does that point mean? 20, 60. What does that point mean? Now, if you're confused, you need to be looking here and here, what those mean. So if I had 2060, let's say it's right here, what would that entail? Ella.
it means that the enclosure is 60 feet long, and then the storage areas are 20 feet long.
The storage what?
Areas are 20 feet long.
Not the areas, but the length of the storage is 20 each, yes. Does that make sense? And then that means your enclosure would be 60. Is everyone understanding that? You're taking the 100 feet that you have, you're subtracting it by the two storage units, which is 20, which gives you 60. Are we okay?
Yes.
Are we sure?
Yes.
Okay. Here it says describe the domain. We kind of already did that. All right, here we go. This is where things get a little crazy. And this is on page 660.
666. Oh my golly.
Let's do the easy part first. We talked about the y-intercept already, and we said that was 0, 100, correct? And that meant no storage. And all enclosure. So it would just be an enclosure. The x-intercept was 50, 0. What did that mean?
Each side storage is 50.
All storage, no enclosure. Increasing or decreasing? Obviously, it's decreasing. The slope is -2, correct?
No.
What in the world does that mean?
It goes down by 2.
But what's that mean in the world of storage length and enclosure length?
That may be like if one is
So you agree that it would be -2 over 1, correct?
so maybe when one goes down 2, one goes up 1.
Cool. Yes.
Like if it closes.
When 1 goes down 2, so if it's rise over run, what's going down 2? The enclosure. Once the enclosure loses how many feet? 2. The side length of the storage unit increases by 1. Does that make sense? So that's what the slope means there. So once the enclosure loses 2 feet, then the storage length includes 1. Okay? Everybody okay with that?
Yep.
Okay. The next thing it asks us to do in number 4 is to write a function to represent the area of the enclosure. So I'm going to go back up here. Okay. We all agreed that the length of this shaded part was 100 minus 2s, correct? That's the length. What should I label the width right here? S, right? This is a square, guys, so all these sides are S, correct? So if I want to find the area of a rectangle, any rectangle in the world, Jaden, how do I find the area?
Times the length and the width.
Times the length and the width. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let's go back to 4. It asks us to find the area. We're going to write this a couple different ways. So we're going to put the area is S times 100 minus 2S. Does that make sense to people?
Yes.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I took my length, which you guys came up with, and I multiplied it by the other side of the storage unit, which is S. Not getting it? What don't you get? Huh?
Me or Katie?
Well, either, because you're both looking at me. What don't you get? The area part or
The area.
the slope?
I'm just confused about the area part. I don't know why though.
So we want to just find the area of this shaded part. And do you agree that the length is 100 minus the 2 sides? Did you get that part?
Yeah.
Now, so I have to do length times width, right? So here's my length. I need to multiply it by width. Well, all of these are S because it's a square. So I have to do S times 100 minus 2S to find the area. Okay.
Oh, because we don't know.
Because we don't know anything yet. And you guys have found out pretty quickly the lengths of the storage unit can be all different, right? We saw some that were 20. We were talking about ones that were 30. So we don't know them yet, so we keep them as S, okay? Now, here's what I want to show you. We can simplify this a little bit more and distribute here. So really, my final answer here is 100S minus 2S squared. Is there anyone that doesn't understand how I got the 2S squared? That's an S, not a 5, by the way.
Oh, it's because of
S times 2S. S times S is S squared. Okay?
That's all the 5.
Everybody good?
Yeah.
Describe how the area of the enclosure changes as the side length increases. Let's look over here. I really like this diagram. Remember, it can get as wide as it wants, right? What happens as it gets wider?
Area increases.
The area of the enclosure decreases.
Oh,
Look at these pictures right here.
I didn't hear what you said.
See, as this is getting wider, the space I have for my dog training seems to be getting a little bit smaller. Well, it kind of gets bigger and then gets smaller, but we'll talk about that. Okay, so let's take our area. This is leading us into, you guys just formed a quadratic equation. You just don't know it, okay? So let's, in here, I'm going to type in y equals 100s minus 2s squared.
Whoa.
They're almost parallel, and then they keep getting smaller and smaller.
It's a circle, yeah.
It's not a circle.
It's a circle. It's a U. That's what I meant.
It's the parabola.
It's a parabola.
Just a very
Just a very skinny one, yes.
parabola.
Stop talking now, Logan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Notice what happens. It goes up, it gets to a point, and then it goes down. Do you guys see that? So this is called a, does anybody remember? Parabola. Very good. So if you look here, so here's the area of the enclosure. So if my, what would I say about this? If my what is what? 25, 1250. That is a maximum. Very good.
Nice.
What does the 25 stand for?
The enclosure. Or wait, no, the length of the storage.
Storage unit is 25. Then I will get a maximum area of 1250 for my enclosure. Does that make sense to everybody? Are we sure?
Yeah. Oh.
Down here is at 0, 0. That's here again is 50. If I make my storage units on the side each 50 feet, I don't have an enclosure. My area is 0. Does that make sense? So the area starts to increase, it gets to a maximum, and then it starts to decrease. So once I go past 25 feet on my storage units, I start to go down. My area starts to go down. So this is telling you when you're building it, if you want to get the maximum area you can out of your training facility, make your storage units 25 by 25. How do we feel about that?
Good.
Okay-ish? If you look here, S and X are kind of the same, right? So my S is storage unit, and we're trying to find the area. A is area. So my X value is going to be storage length. My Y value is going to be area. So that 25, 12, 50 says if my storage unit's 25, then my area is going to be 1,250.
Wouldn't that area stay the same no matter what you do to it? Because it's never mind.
No.
Talking about the total?
And then when we type it in, this tells us the maximum we can get out of our enclosure
Oh.
by still having storage units, right? If I didn't have storage units, I could just make the whole thing 100 and whatever, but that's not gonna. Okay.